The CS semester begins with unrealistic confidence. Your desk is clean, your folders are organized. You look at the syllabus and think, this time I will not fall behind. This is always the first lie of the semester.
The first lecture is suspiciously manageable. The professor explains variables, functions, maybe a tiny graph, and for 10 minutes, you feel like the chosen one. You leave class ready to become a systems engineer, a startup founder, and maybe a person who finally uses a calendar.
Then the first assignment requires setup. Not programming, setup. You spend 3 hours installing things with names that sound optional but are somehow load-bearing. By midnight, you have written 0 code and developed a personal relationship with your package manager.
A few weeks in, algorithms enters the room. You rewind the lecture 4 times and somehow learn nothing, except the professor owns one very memorable sweater. The explanation makes sense while it is happening, then evaporates the second you open the homework.
By week 4, you create the sacred catch-up weekend. Saturday morning, you will review lectures, finish the lab, start the project, and become a different person. Saturday afternoon, you are still choosing a playlist and convincing yourself that cleaning your desk counts as academic momentum. Then the group project begins. Everyone says they are flexible, which means nobody has done the reading. One person volunteers for front end, one person volunteers for back end, one person volunteers for vibes, and one person disappears until the night before the demo with a message that starts, "Sorry, just saw this." Midterm season arrives, and suddenly everyone becomes a philosopher of curves. The cracked students say they barely studied, which is illegal because they are somehow explaining dynamic programming from memory. You watch the same lecture again and realize understanding and recognition are 2 very different emotions. You go to office hours with one question. The TA says, "It is actually a simple fix," then gestures at the screen like a wizard refusing to reveal the spell. You leave with confidence, open your laptop, and immediately realize you understood the vibe, not the solution. Near the end of the semester, every class remembers it exists. The lab is due, the project is due, the quiz is due. The professor posts a practice exam that is somehow harder than the real class. Your calendar stops being a planning tool and becomes a list of threats. The final project becomes a group survival exercise. The app works if one person shares their screen, another person does not touch the database, and everyone agrees the missing settings page is a design choice. You call it an MVP because that sounds better than unfinished. Finals week is when your brain starts negotiating with physics. You study until sunlight appears through the blinds and convince yourself that 3 hours of sleep is basically a lifestyle. At some point, recursion finally makes sense. Unfortunately, this happens at 5 in the morning, when nobody should be trusted with insight.
Then, the final ends. You walk out with no thoughts, no memory, and a suspicious peace. 2 days later, someone asks what you learned this semester, and your brain returns a blank screen. But somehow, you survived. And next semester, you will absolutely stay ahead. Follow for more animated tech disasters.